Good evening, everyone. It's time for Radio Dead Air Tech Q&A. You've got questions. We've got guesses. I'm Nash. I've been doing Radio Dead Air for ages and ages. In addition to that, I'm also an IT professional. With me, as always, my producer, Mike Gearman, who is also in tech. If you've got questions for us, you can send those to requests at radiodeadair.com, and we will do our best to help you out. Or if you're watching this on the YouTube, you can put those in the comment section. Luke in the channel is like, seeing Ryzen CPUs on fire. What? Yeah, it's unrelated to what happened to you, Luke, but we'll get there.
What happened to Luke? I think I missed something.
We'll talk about it when we get to the Ryzen stuff. How have you been doing?
Not bad. I picked, as I said right before we started, I picked up Dragon Age. I'm getting used to the controls. Yeah. I did to play a mage because that looked like the style I most liked. So we'll see.
Yeah, I recommend swapping the F key and the space bar, so you swap dodge and jump, because I'm so used to jump being space. I don't know why they would switch that around. So yeah, I've got some news for this week. We're answering some questions from one we'll pick up from last week, in fact, and we got some more. We got a lot this week, which is nice.
Oh shoot!
Always happy to have you folks.
Question.
I researched it. Don't worry. I got it. First off, though, and why we're bringing this up is Luke in the channel RocksNet. Please find him on YouTube and Twitch. He's excellent streamer and video maker. He just got a system, newish system built. And I'm thinking what happened is the motherboard did not have an updated BIOS. So it was likely still using the bad BIOS, because if you'll think back a ways, last year we had a rash of the Ryzen 7000 CPUs catching fire. And the problem wasn't the CPUs, it was the BIOS were sending them way too much electricity. And Asus was one of those. And they had to fix that. But apparently, if you still have one of those older BIOSes on the motherboard, it could still damage your Ryzen. And Luke got hit with that, and he had to replace that, which sucks. Well,
you got to replace, though. You got to replace, right?
Yeah. Well, come to find out, got a little bit of deja vu going on. Some users on Reddit are showing that their brand new, very expensive.
I'm going to correct you immediately.
What?
A user on Reddit.
They've been two of them.
Okay.
They've been two of them. Two different users on Reddit are showing that their Ryzen 9800 X3Ds are burned and there is damage to the socket. And now this could go one, and these were both done with MSI Tomahawk 8X870. Now this could be one of two things.
It could be the motherboard.
It could be the motherboard. This could be user error. Let's be honest up front. This could actually be user error. And a while back, a few, like 5-6 years ago, I would have said user error would have been the more likely scenario. But as time has gone on, and we've had these motherboard manufacturers who are vying with each other for performance bumps and numbers, their only way to compete with each other is to screw with the CPU in ways that aren't exactly in line with the specifications for the CPU. And Intel let them get away with that for far too long, and we see how that turned out. They've also sort of, with the early Ryzen 7000 stuff, they took that philosophy to Ryzen and fire.
And fire bad inside your computer. There's places it's fine. Inside the computer is not one of them.
It's not a happy place for fire. Fire doesn't want to be inside your computer. It's boring there.
Let me tell you another thing that doesn't want to be inside your computer. Cat piss.
I love one of these Redditors' names is Trump Poo Poo Pants. That's his Redditor username. So
yeah.
Okay, that good on you there, bro. Like the fuck.
What I'm going to say there is it's Reddit. They seem to have very low standards as to what they will allow as names. There's only a handful of things that they will stop you from using, and that one's fine.
There's also, if you look at the pictures, there's something weird with the socket. Not just the pins.
I was wondering that looks like physical damage to the socket in the red squared off, in the yellow squared off area.
Yeah.
I mean, below that and to the right of that, we've got obvious scorch marks.
Yeah.
But that looks like something delaminated or
maybe
was pried off. Now that could be if when the damage occurred, it is right, possible when the burning damage occurred that the CPU was then stuck, and when he pried it out, that damage happened. We don't have enough details to know.
Yeah, a lot of where the fire issues can come from is there is a lot of power running through these CPUs going through those little pins there.
Yeah.
And if something goes goofy, well, that's kind of a lot for it to take.
Now, the good news here on this one is that Gamers Nexus has offered to buy the CPU and maybe the motherboard off this guy so they can do an investigation, and they'll come back. If they come back with anything other than, this looks like user error, we'll find out about it pretty quickly.
If nothing else, we're going to keep hearing the name Trump poo-poo's pants in tech circles for a couple more weeks, which...
We'll hear it in non-tech circles for the next 4 years.
Next up, it's a little tiny itty bitty bit of good news. If you have an NVIDIA GPU, one of the experiences that we've been having to contend with NVIDIA GPUs for over a decade plus, I think closer to 20 years. This is about over a decade. NVIDIA's control system for their graphics has been a mess. There's been the NVIDIA control panel, which has all of the granular controls, the little nitty gritty stuff you can do with your graphics card, all the little tweaks and stuff you can mess with it. And then you have GeForce Experience, which is more user-friendly interface, but the two existed side by side. And you had to have both for full,
And some versions of GeForce Experience required you to have an NVIDIA login to download stuff, which this new thing that they're rolling out walks that back. And they said, you know what? People just hate that.
Yeah, so
we've already got their money. Why get credentials from them?
At long last, NVIDIA has finally released it's now out and available. It's out of beta. There is the NVIDIA app. That's what it's just called, the NVIDIA app, and it is supposedly a combination of the GeForce Experience and the NVIDIA control panel, which should have the same, features, but remains to be seen. I'd like to see someone do a deep dive and go side by side and see what is and is not available.
I'm going to wait a minimum of 2 weeks. The reason being, in 2 weeks, we may have the other story of here's all the crap the NVIDIA app gets wrong.
Yeah, it could.
I've mentioned on here before, there have been times that NVIDIA has pushed down an update and it has screwed up all my sound settings. It has said, no, even though there is no sound connected off your video card, because I am connecting my sound somewhere else, we are going to set the NVIDIA card to be the default sound, and suddenly your speakers do not work.
Windows is kind of a dick like that.
That's not Windows. That's purely NVIDIA in that case. Windows is letting it happen, but Windows can't tell that it's not me doing it.
There are often times where this is kind of something that's been necessary. There are often times when games have more capabilities than are available to users, because if you could go into your GeForce, your NVIDIA control panel, you can actually access more options like dithering and what was that?
That was one of my neighbors in a very loud vehicle.
Okay. There's dithering.
There's 2 streets away.
There's dithering. There's anti-aliasing layers. There's even more stuff that you can get into that can improve your games. But the just because the developers didn't add those setting sliders to the games, you can't access them. You can get at them through the GeForce control panel, and you can improve how your game looks by overwriting the game settings. I'm hoping that this makes that an easier process so people can have more control over how they want their games to look. In fact, ideally, it would be nice if video games, I don't know if this is going to technically possible because it's got to be on different platforms. It would be nice if NVIDIA stuff could just take over for the game and the game not have to worry about control settings and they'd be all on NVIDIA side. Like you wouldn't have to change. Yeah.
I think that way might lie some antitrust issues, Nash.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if they did that, then AMD could do the same thing. You know, just take that section out because the cards themselves have way more potential and opportunity and options. But like if you're playing older games, like say you've got Fallout 3 out, Fallout New Vegas, look up some forum posts on this, on like Fallout 3 GeForce or NVIDIA control panel. There are settings in there that can make it look so much better on modern machines. It's wild.
Now, we had a question in the chat about this, as what GPUs are supported. And I went and looked that up. And it is RTX 20, 30, and 40 series GPUs, the GTX 800, 900, 1000, and 1600 series GPUs, and the GeForce MX100, MX200, MX300, 800M, and 900M GPUs. Yeah.
Pretty much everything that's supported by the current driver. The
only operating systems supported are Windows 10 and 11.
Yeah, anything GeForce 700 and older are not supported. So it's only
which is not a surprise.
Yeah, those are from 10 years ago. So I do figure out that as time goes on, as cards get dropped, because the 800 series is probably coming up soon to be dropped from support. As cards drop out, they won't be. No, 10 series is covered.
10 series. Okay, so there's GTX, which is the 10 series, 1000 series, and then it goes to RTX, and that's 20, 30, 40.
Yeah, 10 series is covered. Just everything that is still viable on the current driver is viable in this. So if it anything 800 and more recent, 700 and back, not covered. All right, last one this week. We are talking about looking into the effects of what's coming on for next year and the tariffs. I've noticed that, and it's very frustrating, quite a few companies are not pricing in or making specific plans for potentially 20 to 60% tariffs on their goods.
Some of them maybe let's see if he blinks.
That seems incredibly dumb because the people involved are incredibly dumb. But one company is like, nope, fuck that.
We believe him.
Yeah. The company, they are called, surprisingly enough, PC Partner, which you might not have heard of, but you definitely have heard of if you're into computer stuff. You know Zotac and you know Inno3D. You might even know Monley. Those are very big brands for graphics cards makers. And particularly Zotac. Zotac makes a lot of the both the affordable GPUs, I put big air quotes around that, and also GPUs for OEMs like Dell and HP. A lot of their cards, which are Dell and HP branded, are actually Zotac cards that are reference design, but Zotac manufactures them and puts them together. They are getting the hell out of China.
Yep, they're moving to Singapore.
Which that's going to be a fun one, because do you think our next president actually understands the difference?
No.
Yeah.
But unless he's given a Sharpie, I am reasonably certain that someone can point it out to him on a map.
And then he could draw his own map and completely screw it up like he's done before. So the effort here is to try to get out from under a potential 60% tariff, which criminy. Now, keep in mind, they've also said that even if they get out from under 60% tariff, there's going to be a 20% blanket tariff on all imported goods, which is nuts. But that's what they've promised, and there's a whole lot of people going, nah, that would be silly. They're not actually going to do that. And it really hurts.
I'm reminded of all the things people said he wouldn't do his first term, and then he did them.
He did them. Yeah. It's
he doesn't mean it.
Why wouldn't he mean it? That's what. Why the hell wouldn't he freaking mean it? So it's interesting to see a company this big go, oh, fuck this. It's a lot to move your to move your manufacturing, to move your production. It's a lot to get the hell out of a country. And it's in Asia, it's a little easier because there are more manufacturing facilities in neighboring countries. So you do have an option. You just go, okay, there's a factory over here. We got to move all our crap. You actually have a factory to go to. Moving stuff to America is like, it's like John Travolta in Pulp Fiction. It's like where there's no place to, ain't nobody going to build it. Ain't no place to build it. We're trying to be at places to build it. They ain't done yet. So it's, moving manufacturing and people. Yeah, it is a lot. And not everybody can move because, China's picky about freedom of movement and other things. This whole geopolitical crap sucks. This whole planet's full of really terrible people. I hate it. I hate it so much. Still, everyone should take into account prices will, after January, prices are definitely looking toward going up, and plan accordingly is what we're telling you to do here. It's dumb. It's frustrating, but it's where we are. All right. That is the news for this week. Let's actually get to your questions now. First one is one we had left from last week. We were asked about choosing a VPN now for among the options. I did look them up. Mostly I referred to a site called Torrent Freak because they are, by nature, they have to be very particular about security and how a VPN can treat your data and whatnot, and if they're going to rat on you, because I've noted that I use ExpressVPN, which comes out okay. They don't keep, they claim they don't keep records. I understand a lot of this has to go based on what the company claims. Hey, thank you, Jiggly Saint. You enjoy that great emote. It's based on if the company there are some companies that can do independent audits and whatnot, but
it's what they claim and what they've been caught violating on claims. So if a VPN says, hey, we don't keep records, and then suddenly a lot of their customers get busted by the police of whatever nation, you go, well, how did they know? Did you guys actually keep records? Yeah, we did.
So it's hard to assess. Pretty much you're essentially going on these companies' words, and you won't know until something happens. There is no guarantee here. This is not like high level OPSEC kind of stuff. These are not like big security firms. These are just VPN services. You're getting what you pay for. They're commercial companies. They will advertise, they will say things, and we all know how advertisement is. So pretty much I can tell you from my own experience, ExpressVPN is fairly fast. And that's relative to VPNs. Like we've said last week, if you're using a virtual private network, you're going to take a speed hit. That's just the nature of the tech. You're going from your computer to someone else's computer to the internet. It's actually acting as an intermediary for you. And as such, there will be lag and latency, no matter how good the connection. That said, ExpressVPN has been pretty good for us. I've used it for a long time, at least 10 years now. Haven't had any problems with them. So if that's your concern, that's my personal recommendation, that's the one I've been using. And I will say again, NordVPN is the only one on this list that I'm aware of that has had a massive security breach. So they can say we're better now, and maybe they are, but they had a massive security breach. So, okay, let's get on to the new questions now. If you want to look at the list, it's on torrentfreak.com, and you can look up their list of best VPNs and see for yourself, because they talk to the companies to see what the company said. That's basically the way they can do it. Okay, let's see. We got the questions here. I put them over on my Gmail. I didn't put it on the big screen here. Here it is. Okay. This is from Akir Dragonheart. They say, I built my PC at the end of 2020. With how things are going and the fact I can't afford to fully replace it, I'd like to know what things to work on replacing first so it can survive. I use a PC both as my general use device, watching YouTube, web browsing, playing games, as part of handling my Patreon, so sort of mission critical to me. List of parts is Ryzen 7 3700X, MSI Mag B550 Tomahawk, G-Skill Ripjaws, 16 gigs DDR4 3600. It's pretty good. Got a 1 terabyte ADATA M.2 drive. RTX 2070 Super, it's not bad. And a 550 watt power supply from EVGA and a Lee Landcool 2 mesh mid tower case. All right. A lot of that stuff is still fairly viable. It's in particular, the fact you have a B550 motherboard, that's good. That was the last iteration of AM4, which means it has the most compatibility with AM4 CPUs, and you have access to PCIe 4.0. Earlier, the B350 did not have access to that, and I think B450 was iffy. Might have been added to all of it, but it's hard to remember. But I do know B550 for sure has access to PCIe 4.0, so that's really good. If you are on a tight budget, staying on AM4 may be a fairly viable choice, because a full replacement is going to get very expensive soon. And if you're already struggling money-wise, unfortunately, a full replacement might be unobtainable. So it may be best to look at potentially getting... You are limited on how far you can go here. You only have one generation of CPUs you can move toward. And you're already... The Ryzen set, the 3700X is not bad. Even today, it's not bad. If you move to Ryzen 5, I would... If you're looking at it for work, the only two I would consider really are a 5900X or a 5950. because that would be, while the IPC improvements between the two generations are pretty big, it doesn't really make sense to me to swap an 8-core processor for anything more than something bigger than an 8-core processor. So, you know, the only other two things that are really standing out to me, the RTX 2070 Super is still pretty good. That's about 3060 Ti performance. So it's I guess you'd call it entry-level gaming these days. But it's still fairly robust and powerful. I mean, you're doing 1080p with a bunch of the sliders turned up. You're good. You might have some more challenges at stuff like 1440p and 4K, but it's still perfectly viable for gaming. Honestly, of the whole stack, that 550 watt power supply may be one I would consider moving to, maybe like a 700 watt Corsair. That might be an idea. Just because EVGA they're not as big anymore. They're still around and they are still charging their power supplies, but I just don't know how long they're going to be viable just focusing on power supplies. Yeah, I see Charlie back there being silly. What are you two doing, weirdos? It's always a good idea to have a little bit more of a beefier power supply. Your graphics card could be improved, maybe. If you are determined to keep RTX and DLSS and all that, I'd look at maybe a 4060. That would be a bit of an upgrade here. Not a huge one, but it could handle 1440p game a little bit better. You're still on what I consider the last viable generation, which is the RTX 20 series. For AMD, that would be Ryzen, the 6000 series, because the 5000 series is just sort of falling behind. So yeah, you're still on, like,
doesn't give us a budget here of what he can afford. That'd be useful here.
But if you're staying on AM4, then I'd look at a 5900, 5950. You can find those used. There's a lot of those used right now, and they are still perfect. If you get it from a reputable seller, they're perfectly good used. That would be, that would definitely be a good savings money-wise. Maybe you want to move up some RAM. DDR4, it's going to start getting that. It's sort of a paradox, but the older the RAM gets, for a while, it's like the price goes down when a new version of RAM comes out. Over time, it's like the new version of RAM is real expensive and its price starts going down, and the old version, less people buying it, but then they stop making it. And then all of a sudden, the DDR4, and this happened with DDR3, they stopped making DDR3, the price went down, and then it started going back up. And people who specifically had systems that were mission critical and needed DDR3, they were struggling to find it. So you might want to maybe move to 32 gigs. That probably won't be terribly expensive, all things considered.
No, it shouldn't be at all.
This could still be
the hard part you might have if you insist on continue to use your existing 16 gig is finding something that matches. But I would say instead just go and buy 2 16 gigs and go with that.
Yeah, it's always with DDR RAM, and someone can explain more why this is, but generally the more sticks you add, the slower they go. They lose. You're only guaranteed, like if you get a 4-stick kit, you'll notice those are typically tend to be slower than 2-stick kits. And you think to yourself, well, I'll just get 2 2-stick kits and they'll be faster. No. It's the more RAM you add, the harder it is to hit those speeds. So the less RAM, if you're only using 2 sticks of RAM, you're definitely going to hit those target speeds a lot easier, and it tends to be faster.
And you can get G-Skill Ripjaw. Are you 5 series? 5 series? You 5 series?
Yeah, it's Ripjaw 5.
Yeah, you can get basically the same thing, twice the memory, $65 or less.
That's pretty decent right now. So yeah, that's basically what I'd say for you. If money's tight, the good thing is AM4 is going to be viable for a while. It's only the 5000 series is only 2 generations back, and those were exceptional processors. They really paved the way for the 7000 series. The 5950X is still about as fast as the 7900X, and that's the one I'm using right now. So you have there is a limit on what you can get in there, but it's a pretty good limit. And the system's going to be viable for a while. Going forward, graphics card would if all you do is one thing, then a more powerful graphics card is going to have a bigger kick to this system than anything else.
Yeah.
But
the Sapphire Cat in the channel, if you're wondering if you go above 16 gig RAM in your setup, the thing you look up is your motherboard and see what its specs say.
Yeah, and typically that's like these days it's like 256 gigs, or because it's a massive amount of RAM you can use these days. The only thing you're limited in is the configuration of the RAM sticks. Yeah. If you can get to
let me state, sometimes the motherboard will say this motherboard can hold this much RAM. Then you look at the processor and the processor will go, yeah, I can't address that much though. But most stuff just these days, we're way above 265 gigabytes these days. We have been since the Ryzen first generation Ryzen. We're way above. Well, I want to say last year when we were doing the ultimate build, I was trying to throw as much RAM as I could into a machine. And the motherboard I picked said, yeah, it'll hold this much. And I started putting that much RAM in there and I got a warning saying, no, you can't actually. Well, that on the other hand, that is PC part picker. It might not be accurate. Oh, that's fair. All right, next up is from Diego. End of next week, I get a $1,000 bonus on a $200 work bonus at the end of the month, and I intend to put together a new gaming PC to replace my current R5 3600 GTX 1060 system. Yeah, that's a little on the teeth. I want to get your opinion on my build and a few new questions. I'm looking at for my current build minus the SSDs. Should I invest in an all-in-one for the 5700 X3D, or would an air cooler be enough for gaming? First of all, liquid cooling is kind of my big problem with liquid cooling is, while it is very efficient and effective and quieter, liquid cooling does tend to be quieter. That's the main advantage it has. It's also more moving parts. If your air cooler dies, it means the fan broke. You just put a new fan on it. If a liquid cooler dies, that's a mess and you have to replace the whole thing. There's no option to fix those unless you're like really stupid about it. And even then, I wouldn't really be, unless you really know what you're doing, I wouldn't trust that. Yeah, that said, the 5700 X3, that's the processor. Yeah. I would go an all-in-one cooler there because the X3Ds run kind of warm. No, they just no. They run less wattage. Yeah, but they don't. They have the clock limitation. No, but that's why they run. That's why they run. They have a wattage limit, and they have a clock is slower because the first two generations had the RAM on top, so you couldn't overclock them, and their boost is limited, their wattage is limited. They run cooler. So yeah, we're at a point where a big enough air cooler will do just as good as job as a liquid cooler. It's going to run quieter. I personally, for longevity, and if you want a set it and forget it, air coolers are kind of the way to go. If you feel like messing around with stuff and you're in a position where you could replace that liquid cooler should something go wrong, sure, but most folks aren't. And let's see, what's the Assassin? What the hell? There's so many models. in Thermal Right has so many models right now. One of their dual 120 fan setups is you can get those about as low as like $30, $35 for a dual 120
Peerless Assassins, they have so many models of Peerless Assassin. One of those will be a beast on a 5700 X3D. In fact, that one's that one's one of those ones that was a 5800 X3D, but it couldn't hit those speeds, so they turned it down a little and marketed it as a 5700 X3D. So, yeah, that one's even using even less. It's that one's not even cranking as high as the other one is. If it were me right now and I'm worried about money and I'm worried about longevity, air cooler. No question. How much RAM should I get? Currently have 16. Should I make the jump to 32? Yes. 32 is becoming absolutely the new base level.
And your question about should I go with two 16s or 4 8s? Well, we just covered that. Yeah. 2 16s.
2 16s. Yeah. Have modern games started to take advantage of modern SSD speed? Oh, yes. Oh, yes, they have.
Yes.
But that thing is, there's only so much they can take care. They can, like, if you are just playing games, or even if you're just doing a little video editing, you don't need PCIe Gen 5. Yep. You do not. There's no call for that level of SSD.
The only thing it will do, realistically, is slow down or lower the loading times of certain things. Like, for example, I'm just going to use mine here as an example. As I said at the beginning of the show, I just picked up Dragon Age. First thing it did when I launched it, it said compiling shaders. If I'd had a faster drive there, maybe that compile would have gone a little faster.
Yeah. It's all it can do is load. We're talking like seconds, like 2 to 3 seconds difference. Even PCIe Gen 3 and Gen 4, the speed difference between them is almost negligible. If you want to get a larger Gen 4 drive than the Gen 3 you have right now, that's a good idea. Don't buy. If you're buying a new drive, there's no reason to buy a Gen 3 because the prices are interchangeable at this point.
Yeah, but for what you get, it's not worth it.
But PCIe Gen 5, you're not going to see any appreciable. So don't go crazy with that. Gen 4 is still fine. That's only if you're going to replace the hard drive at all. We have got a lot. We got more questions came in. Woo wee. All right. Next one is from Sonny. He says, or she. No, Sonny spelled SON. That's what is that short for? What is Sonny short for?
That's one of the Sea Witch. That's one of the Sea Witch's kids in Popeye.
Yeah, I'm thinking Godfather. It's not short for Salvatore, but it's Sonny. Yeah. Anyway, Sonny. Hi. Sorry. Off on a little tangent there. This is more out of curiosity than anything, but do you know the max safe number of hard drives I can run over a standard SATA power cable? I wanted to build a big media server, and it's more economical to go with spinning drives over M.2. So how many is too many? Well, Santino, there you go. Thank you, Santino. That was what Sonny was short for. Santino. Anyway, let's see. Well, this comes down.
That is going to depend on your power supply, your PSU, and the cabling it uses.
Well, this comes down to a matter of the SATA spec and current draw, amperage. That is the major limitation on any of these. Molex, which was the one we had before SATA, actually carries more current than SATA can. If I'm remembering
bigger wires.
Yeah, and SATA has smaller little bitty wires, but it was like, oh, we don't need that. One wire of SATA, one SATA cable, typically, if they're following the specification, which they should, if they're not, they're making an unsafe product. If they're following the specification, one string of SATA cables on one, you know how they have multiple SATA plugs on one line of cables off a power supply? Yep. One of those maxes out at 4.5 amps. And let's see, standard SATA hard drive amperage is hard drives typically draw between 5 to 1.5 amps per voltage. So that means each one of those SATA cables is capable of handling, let's see, 4.5 amps, 1.5, so should be able to handle 3 per string. Which it's not a lot, but that's it's typical mechanical hard drive. Multiple strings can hold more. So if you put 3 on one and 3 on another, you'll notice there's a limit to the number of those connectors, or there should be in the SATA. And also keep in mind, hard drives don't draw constant current. They're up and down, they're up and down. They're not all drawing current at the same time. They're not all maxed out constantly at 1.5 amps. Sometimes they're using down around half an amp, sometimes they're using 1.5 amps, but they're not all drawing power at once. So you have a little bit of a leeway. You'll probably be able to get away with 4 on there, unless you're like suddenly copying everything to all 4 at the same time, slamming them super hard. So 4 is probably safe. So depending on how many connectors you have on your power supply, anywhere, if you have like 2 strings of SATA, that's 8. Depending on how big your power supply is, how many connections you have for extension, like the Molex SATA accessory line, however many of those you have. I think you if you were really crazy about it, you might hit the limit of your motherboard SATA connectors before you hit the limit of how many hard drives you could have in that system. So,
although I will say if he's doing this, he's probably using, I would suggest probably an older motherboard, which may have more SATA connectors. A lot of boards are now cutting down the number of SATA connectors they have because they don't need them anymore.
I think mine has 4, and mine's an expensive motherboard. Most of them these days in the what you call the affordable segment, they only have like 2 now, which, like, everything's going to M.2. There's really no point in having SATA connectors. Eventually, they're not going to have them at all.
Yeah,
which is we're seriously going. We're going to reach.
What eventually is going to happen, of course, Nash, is we'll be saying this if we're still doing the show 10 years from now. We're going, yeah, I got the really expensive motherboard. It's got 4 M.2 connectors as a legacy. But, it's got 6 crystal slots.
Well, I mean, we're slowly moving toward a point where SATA is going to be obsolete for consumer use. It's still going to be in use for enterprise, because enterprise holds on to everything forever, and military holds on to everything forever. Like, they still have floppy disks and some crap. Are y'all? Is the Navy still using tubes, or is that long ago and gone?
That depends on the program. Nothing I do use.
You wouldn't happen to be able to dip into the surplus and find me a couple of 5881s, would you?
What you're asking there is called inventory fraud / mismanagement, and I think I had my last training on that about 3 years ago. So let's just go with no.
It's like a light bulb. Who's gonna miss a light bulb?
I can ask the Dermo guys to keep an eye out. The problem there is, when they sell stuff from Dermo, it's generally by the pallet.
Considering how much those, oh man, it's crazy. Vacuum tube price is crazy. Anyway, we're going to hit a point fairly soon where home users aren't going to have spinning drives anymore, or the only ones they have are going to be USB connected, because we've hit like USB 3, USB 4. It's about as fast a connection as SATA, and It doesn't have the direct connection to the CPU that SATA does, but for what people use external hard drives for, it's not really going to matter. And people are just going to use it for data, for like media storage or backup or whatnot, and that doesn't matter as much. So we're not, the internal hard drives are on their way out, slowly but surely. All right, we got a couple new ones come in. Erica.
Okay, I haven't seen these yet, so.
Erica says, in last week's Tech Q&A, you mentioned not getting rid of old computer parts in case you needed them or someone you know might need them. I have about 4 or 5 older PCs I haven't gotten around to recycling, but I do not know anyone who builds or updates their computers on their own, and I'm not look for parts anyway. So I'm trying to find places that take old PCs and refurbish them to donate or sell to lower income people, but it's hard to know if any are reputable or not. Do you know of any organizations or places that will do this? And related, what do I need to take out of my old PCs to make sure nothing is left with personal data in it? I think I've deleted everything, but can't be sure anymore.
So the obvious answer there is just remove the media. So if you remove the hard drives, then you're good. And anyone who could be refurbishing is probably will throw a cheap hard drive in there anyway. Now, as for sources that do that, I don't know of any off the top of my head, but maybe you do, Nash.
Well, in my area, if your Goodwill has a computer department, that is completely reputable. Goodwill, they take them, they bring them in, they service them, and they make them available for reasonable prices. I mean, when our Goodwill still had their computer section running, we went in there and we got an old 1080p HD Dell monitor. Didn't have HDMI, just had DVI, so it was kind of older, but it was a nice little monitor, 60 hertz, and we walked out of there with that for $20.
And so Otaku Boy in the chat just put up PCs for People, which is apparently basically a refurb site that they will take your stuff.
Okay. School. I wouldn't say donate them to schools, because
okay. I'll tell you the main reason you don't donate to schools right now is because the schools want to have a consistent base on their tech, because they don't have the money to have an IT department that can handle 50 to 100 different versions of computers rolling around. They have the IT department that handles, okay, it's the beginning of the year, I'm issuing the Chromebooks. It's the end of the year, I'm collecting the Chromebooks.
Yeah, they go with, they can't just take in like 20 different models because that's a nightmare to deal with. They have to be.
It would be a great way for someone to introduce a bunch of malware to a system, realistically.
So it's pretty much, if you want to get them to the community, you've got to go through an intermediary who's capable of processing them. Goodwill can, the PCs for People, I'll have to look into that. But if Goodwill in your area doesn't do it, I would just look around and pretty much try to find someone local who's reputable. A good place to ask is Best Buy. Because
now I will say one thing about turning in computer equipment to Goodwill. Been a couple of years since I did this, but they will make you sign something indicating that you dropped this stuff off. And the reason being, there are people in the world who go out and go, I've robbed this house.
There's that.
I've gotten everything of value. I'm going to just turn over the stuff I don't want to Goodwill because the police aren't going to look there.
And there's also people who leave terrible things on hard drives because they're idiots. They're terrible, terrible idiots.
Yep. I mean, the only things I turned over to Goodwill were older monitors, and I still signed for them because, hey, maybe they're stolen, but of course they weren't.
The number of people who get arrested at Best Buy because of the shit they leave on their fucking hard drives is crazy.
Yep.
So yeah, that's pretty much what I would say. So, last one, Sarah Brody. Hi. I've been looking at getting a desktop gaming PC, but I have limited space, so I've been looking into the slim models. Do you have any advice on which ones to buy and which ones to avoid? Ooh, Sarah, I'm going to tell you straight up and down, do not get a slim model PC. Absolutely not.
The reason for this is if you get that, you are basically stuck with that ecosystem, their parts, their whatever for replacement, because no one's making components that you can put in there other than those manufacturers. And some of them will do screwy things with power supplies. So you can only buy the replacement power supply from that vendor.
Especially with slim ones. Slim, the trade-off on slim PCs, I know you're looking to save space. Everyone's looking to save space. But the trade-off there is, for the longest time, PCs had standardized parts. We had ATX standard. Cases had to fit. If it was ATX standard, all cases could fit the same motherboard or type, as long as it adhered to the specification. The power supply could fit to the specification. All of those things meant if something broke, you could just walk into the store, grab something off the shelf, throw it back in, you're back up and running. That's also why for, buying new computers, I recommend going with a system builder that does not use anything proprietary.
Yeah.
Newegg's house brand ABS, Micro Center's house brand PowerSpec, even iBuyPower or CyberPower, because they all use off-the-shelf parts. Easy to upgrade, easy to service, easy to repair. They're cheap to fix. Even if you go out of warranty, fixing one of those systems is trivial. But fixing a Dell or fixing an HP or fixing even some Lenovo. We got a Lenovo here that Sarah had. Still have that terrible thing. Fixing any of those becomes a problem because they design, you want the slim form factor. People want the slim, so they design parts made for the slim form factor. These do not conform to industry standards, so they make their own standard. And you get a power supply that will only work in that case, that model that they're only releasing for that year. And a motherboard that only works with that power supply in that case, that model for that year. And sometimes they do silly things like solder the CPU to the motherboard, or sometimes they will do crappy stuff like take laptop style parts and put them in a slim device because they run lower power, therefore they're easier to cool. It's if this is going to be your system, you will get better deals and better longevity out of a standardized system. That's not saying that some of those cases can't be smaller, but like there is some play, there is some room to play within the ATX specification. But on the other hand, I would not feel comfortable recommending a slim PC to anybody, just because it's a terrible value. It's a terrible deal. It will cause you so many headaches. Like, for example, like I said, Sarah and that, my Sarah, not you, Sarah. Sarah had a Lenovo gaming PC when we first met. And I was like, oh, I can upgrade this. This will be cool. So yeah, I can add some stuff to it. I looked at that case. Number one, non-standard motherboard. So could not replace the power supply because the power supply connectors were all different and the motherboard was all different. They had designed it, and a lot of companies do this these days. It is cheap and ridiculous. They had designed an AMD FX processor to use an Intel cooler, a cheap-ass Intel-type cooler, because it's cheaper for them if they just get one cooler type. But because of that, you couldn't use a standard AMD cooler in that system. So I couldn't give her something better. It was limited to 92 millimeter fans, intake and exhaust. It's a disaster. I still have it kind of as a little knockaround system in case we need something for an emergency, but it's garbo. It's absolute garbo. I would never in a million years buy anything that didn't use off the rack parts. It's a terrible plan. All right, got one last one came in from Daryl just now.
How you doing, Daryl?
I've got yeah. How you still in the hospital? Hope you're doing better. He's had some rough health stuff lately. Got a 6800 XT 16 gig, and I want to keep 4K gaming as an option plus streaming. Am I good until 2026 or so, or should I look for an upgrade? I figure the answer is yes, but I've been getting slightly paranoid recently. As long as you're not focused on ray tracing, that is the only issue with AMD side of things. They're weak on ray tracing. So you're probably, if you want ray tracing at 4K, you're probably gonna have to make some compromises and turn down some settings. On the other hand, you'll have access to FSR, which is still not as good as DLSS, but it does have frame generation. I've come to note now that I've got a 4K monitor and the 4080 over here. Frame gen is so useful for high resolution gaming, because when I'm already running at like 190 to 100 FPS, using frame generation, I don't notice it. It's just, it's like smear panels in betweens, if you know animation, that's what they're called. The system generates phantom images that make the whole experience seem smoother than it actually is. I wouldn't recommend using it for online games or first-person shooters or anything competitive, because you need real data for that, not fake data. But if you're playing first-person games like Starfield, like Dragon Age Veilguard, anything like that, and you have access to frame generation, that makes a world of difference. It's super useful. So with the 1600 XT, you have access to AMD's frame generation. Again, limited compared to NVIDIA's, but still very effective. Is ray tracing even that important? I mean, Sapphire Cat, okay. Everybody says ray tracing, ray tracing, ray tracing. Here's what ray tracing is. They have managed to, in real time, model a light source so that all of the surfaces in the area react to the light source as if it was a real light bulb or a real sun or any other source of light. You get the shadows cast a certain way and the luminance, and so it's a lot for developers. It's kind of easier to develop a light source because that way they're not modeling the light source. This way, light behaves as light does in the real world, in theory. The only problem is it takes a lot of processing power. NVIDIA has special section of the GPU just for handling ray tracing, and even that gets a little bogged down. It's still not perfect. Yeah, nice reflections. Yeah, that's another one. It's still not perfect. They're working on it. Honestly, if you want to use ray tracing does work well with frame generation because it helps make up the frames you're lost by turning on ray tracing. But to the 6800 XT, 16 gigs, you have plenty of VRAM, which comes in handy for 4K because you have larger textures. So more VRAM matters the higher your resolution. That'll come in handy. That keeps it viable. You still may have to turn stuff down, depending. But you'll probably be able to keep a viable 90 plus frame rate on just about anything. And I've noticed when I go past 90 FPS, I don't even notice it. I really don't. Like the hardcore Fortnite players might be like, oh no, you have to absolutely have 244 frames or you can't play. Which, okay. But even they don't play at 4K. They turn all their shit down to get the most frame rate, even though it looks like dog turds. So yeah, this 2800 XT until 2060, yeah, you should be. That's a pretty beefy card. It'll keep you going. As time goes on, you may have to turn some settings down, but you'll still be able to get a pretty good experience. Okay, that is going to do it for this week. A lot of questions. Happy to have them. Happy to help folks. That's what we're here for. All right, folks, we will be back next week, 9 p.m. Eastern. If you have tech questions for me and Mike, by all means, please send those to requests@radiodeadair.com. For Mike and myself, we will see you next time. Good night, folks.